Self-ownership is not only a right, it's a biological fact. What self-ownership is, and a template for asserting it without compromise. Many of us grew up in a culture that believes rights are determined by the government. We learned as kids that disobedience is to be punished, that adhering to authority is a virtue. Unfortunately, these beliefs have done severe harm to your sense of self-ownership, because your level of ownership has seemed to be tied to how much authority approves of your behavior. So if you've never deeply pondered what your sovereignty is or implies, or if you've never spoken out loud the uncompromising demand that you own your body, I want to present you with a template to declare self-ownership. Everything this document declares is innate to every human being, regardless of whether or not they have any familiarity with biology, law, or philosophy. This document merely articulates what right to self-ownership is and implies. There are two caveats. The assertion of self-ownership requires boundaries and the defense of those boundaries. Since a child lacks the agency and capability to independently assert and defend boundaries, it is the responsibility of the caregivers to do so. When a caregiver, acting in good faith, lacks the agency to properly protect their dependents, the responsibility to assert and defend the boundaries expands to the members of the community who operate in good faith. 2. At times it becomes necessary to remove someone from their right to liberty or life when their behavior shows capacity, intent, and action to violate the self-ownership of others. There are varying degrees of methods to reduce and prevent such violations. However, the right to self-ownership implies the right to defend it by any means necessary. The core of this document is this paragraph. The human body and mind are inextricable from the person who experiences their thoughts and feels the sensations of their nerves. Every person is inextricably linked to their bones, muscle, nervous system, brain function, emotional state, psychological makeup, etc. It is the will of each person that moves their limbs to accomplish tasks or to enjoy their right to life. For these reasons, self-ownership is not considered conceptual or some legal abstraction to be interpreted. Rather, self-ownership is a biological fact of experiencing life on this earth. The human body requires a variety of factors to facilitate the healthy development and the sustaining of one's wellness. Some of these factors are material, such as food and the nutrients within, water and the hydration it brings, shelter from harsh elements in the form of housing or clothes, a physical place to securely reside, etc. Additionally, the body has psychological needs in order to develop in healthy ways. Some of these psychological needs are to spend adequate quality time with loving parental figures in the early stages of life. Access to community and the sense of social belonging is vital to parasympathetic development. Adequate rest needed to recover from the prolonged stress, and in order to prevent the negative bodily effects of such stress, access to trauma recovery therapies and practices, both lingual and in somatic forms, along with every other aspect of living a life where one's psyche is not dominated by hypervigilance. Without what's required, material or psychologically, the human body is prone to persistent maladaptive psychological and physiological changes or even death. Therefore, the needs of the human body require that the right to life and everything required to sustain it is an extension of self-ownership. The human body exists within an environment. We are held to the earth by the physics of gravity. We breathe the air that surrounds us. We cannot be displaced from oxygen without dying. The fact is, human beings have an organism-environment relationship with the world. Environment guides the epigenetics of every individual, and each of the traits that compose their instincts that were passed down to them from the organism-environment relationship each of their ancestors had. Therefore, the right to self-ownership implies a right to residence in a location fit for healthy survival and of one's body and mind. The human body is capable of feeling many emotions with varying intensities. Some are uplifting, others are depressive. Prolonged states of depressive emotions are shown to have negative effects on immune function and are more likely to result in self-isolating or antisocial behavior. Systems, structures, and non-consent social constructs can cause feelings of powerlessness, degradation, purposelessness, desperation, isolation, extreme anger, etc. Such systems and structures are, at least in part, an affront to mental health and thus the bodily health of those impacted by the structures. Thus, the right to self-ownership implies a right to dignity, that is to say, a right to live with authenticity in one's integrity without sacrificing it for survival under dehumanizing structural violence. An individual being able to live a life of self-respect and in celebration of what they cherish most in life is a curative wellness. The human body is both mortal and fragile. It is clear that since individuals have a right to self-ownership in life, these facts necessitate that self-defense against behavioral violence which threatens one's ownership or life must be a right. Therefore, each person owns an inherent permission to defend one's body against assailants. We live in a time where many inventions have been created specifically to end human lives with a minimal expenditure of energy. This presents a factual challenge to the right to self-ownership in life. The existence of firearms and bombs, and on a macro scale, are an unfortunate promise of lethal violence that needs to be addressed. When organizations use tools of life, when organizations use tools of lethal violence against civilians en masse, those organizations disgrace the right to self-ownership and life. Therefore, a right to self-ownership requires a right of resistance against such forces. This is to say that there is a right of the people to disempower such organizations by any means necessary, including counterviolence. Those reading may see all of this as a wordy way to convey, we hold these truths to be self-evident. Surely, most were already convinced before reading this that self-ownership is a core foundation to the idea of a moral civilization. However, it is important to convey that which is self-evident more thoroughly for the purpose of asserting self-ownership and the boundaries required to protect it. Many people in this culture have been brought up to believe that authority, dominant violence, decides whether or not people have self-ownership or other rights. Because of this, many people are not accustomed to what it looks like to allow oneself to have uncompromising and unapologetic standards regarding how the person they are and the body they own will be respected. The following is a template for anyone who would find such a template useful. Template for the Declaration of Self-Ownership. I own myself in body and mind. It is an undeniable fact that I have more of a right to my body than anyone else. I do not, nor have I ever, consented to the forfeiture of my self-ownership. This sovereignty is not up for debate. I am inextricable from my body and mind. This fact cannot be disputed. Therefore, no other person or entity gets a say or vote in whether or not I own my sovereignty. Legislators do not get a say in my individual self-ownership, and any law passed to strip me of my autonomy is an act of structural combat against my body and mind. Any such law that assails my sovereignty is a dangerous insult not only to my well-being and my humanity, but to the very notion of a just civilization. I do not consent to any such illegitimate law, nor do I consent to any enforcement of a law which seeks to remove my agency over my body. Any enforcer who uses physical force to enforce such dehumanizing law is a combatant. I repeat, no other person or entity gets to have a say in whether or not my body is mine. My body is inextricably my own. Individuals enacting behavioral violence to force my body and mind to endure traumas against my will be met with whatever force is necessary to ensure the persistence of my sovereignty. Entities that monopolize human needs, in whole or in part, specifically to extort resources from thousands of people, do not have any jurisdiction to decide whether or not I own my body, or whether or not I'm allowed to have access to the material needs required for my body's health and security. Monopolizing entities that strangle resources to scalp human needs to captive markets are a fundamental violation of self-ownership. Such forces, which have, in effect, put my right to eat, my right to breathe clean air, my right to residence, my right to maintain my health, behind the gate that they keep, they are perpetrating structural combat against my sovereignty. If I have no access to fair trade for what is required for my body to be healthy and safe, I am entitled to redistribute the resources of monopolizing forces to myself and other victims of captive markets secured by such monopolizing forces. The very existence of such monopolizing forces are incompatible with the idea of human rights. Any company that has a market share of human needs wide enough to be able to decide how many thousands of people per year will be destitute, famished, deprived of health care, deprived of fresh water or clean air, in effect repeat mass murder, and are unworthy of any legal protections whatsoever. Enforcing laws that protect these companies directly oppose self-ownership. It is an act of oppression which qualifies the enforcers to be oppressive combatants. Owners of such companies and high-ranking decision-makers in such companies are structural combatants against self-ownership and human rights and a just civilization. I reiterate that I am the sole and exclusive owner of my body. It is my decision to engage with my right to life as I choose, seeking whatever pleasures so long as my actions do not violate the self-ownership of any other person. The following policies and ideologies are disgraceful to the concept of individual sovereignty and cannot coexist in a just civilization that values self-ownership of all people. The upcoming term accident of birth is not used to claim residents on this earth are a mistake, rather that there are many factors one cannot choose which directly affect how they are treated within the region they happened to be born into. The violation of self-ownership on the grounds of birthplace is wholly disgraceful. To condemn individuals to dehumanization, incarceration,